This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back with Nanette on Hit the Road. Jack, finding the Zodiac. We are continuing last week's talk in regards to the cipher solve, or the decode of the 1963 letter in regards to the assassination of JFK that was mailed on December 3rd of 1963 by the Zodiac. Today is actually the 59th anniversary of JFK's address at American University in Washington, D.C. on June 10th of 1963. I did take some time to review that speech. It is about 27 minutes long and fairly easy to find on the internet. There was a couple excerpts I wanted to take some time to go ahead and share with people, which I thought was extremely interesting. This speech was in regards to bringing an end to the Cold War between Russia and the United States. Some of the things that he had to say in this speech was, what kind of peace do I mean? What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I'm talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. Very powerful stuff. Gives me goosebumps to read. He says, first, let us examine our attitude towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. So let us persevere. Peace not be impractical, and war need not be inevitable. By defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we can help all peoples to see it, to draw hope from it, and move irresistibly toward it. Again, a very moving speech, likely not what America likes to hear because we enjoy war, it seems like, and it seems as though JFK was moving towards the halt of any type of war, or at least engaging in it. So I have done some research this last week in regards to the JFK and RFK period. This is some notes that I briefly jotted down, or at least it's my synopsis on what I was able to find in research. We've been talking about the mob influence on politics and why I have even brought this to people's attention in regards to the Zodiac case and Jack. A lot of the things that we're going to hear in regards to this, we see in the communications from this suspect, including things like racketeering, underground, perverted systems, syndicates. He talks about being smarter than law enforcement and FBI, which is the opposing side here with RFK and the CIA. So my take on it is that Kennedy was voted president with 8,000 fraudulent ballots from Chicago, Illinois, while Mayor Daley was in charge. This was done through the mob and union officials. Now, keep in mind that JFK and RFK also shared Marilyn Monroe with Sam Giancana, a mob boss. Was this, I had to wonder, was this to elicit information from our government officials? Was she a socialite that was involved in the MK Ultra program? There was a lot of areas, or a lot of ways that my brain went with that. But let me just give you some background on Mayor Daley at that particular time. I was able to determine that Mayor Daley was originally the comptroller in Chicago, Illinois. He had the cops in his pocket. He was mob connected. He was Irish. He had support and supported both the Kennedys and the LBJ connections. So he was fairly mixed up in just about everything. And so far as I can tell, the past two mayors that we spoke about, one in the lipstick killings and now here in JFK, we have a very corrupt system that's operating out of Chicago. And as I continued to do my research in regards to the situation, I found that all of the key points or places that we will see letters written to by the Zodiac that are included in the FBI FOIA files include Pennsylvania, Jacksonville, Florida, Chicago, Dallas, Texas, California, all of these locations where I am finding communications and serial killings that happen to take place around political strife. So back to JFK's presidential win also included funding from the mob and the union for his campaign. The goal of the mob and the unions were to get back into Havana, Cuba to reclaim their casinos, racetracks, and drugs, and they believed that JFK would help them do this. JFK also at this time is placing price caps on things like steel and lumber. This is infuriating many big business owners. And we also see the CIA operation during this time called the Bay of Pigs, which is also referenced in the Ramsey ransom note with a sign-off of SBTC. Now, this was also an epic failure of strategic planning, hoped that Kennedy would send American fighters to take over the beach when they arrived. And when they didn't, they were all that were participating at this point had been lost, and most of the countries were looking down on the U.S. for even having attempted this. When the goal of getting Castro out was not obtained, we see that JFK is assassinated. We also see that Hoffa then goes and uses $500,000 of the Teamsters pension fund for the backing of President Nixon, yet another epic failure for this country in the Watergate scandal. And we have a long history of the same families running our state and federal governments to the benefit of those that are not legal, moral, or ethical. So this isn't stopped. We've seen this still today, and we need to review our history to make sure we don't continue as an American, as a citizen of this country, that we don't continue to allow these type of people to run our countries. One of the things that I noticed when I was doing the research on most of these mob members is that they were being arrested and indicted for things like extortion, racketeering, money laundering, tax evasion, but never murder. I could not find, as I looked through them, anybody who had a sentence for murder, though we know they were responsible for killing many people, and it was very well aware that these people were underground criminals. And to that degree, we also saw a letter back in Black Dahlia, in which case the purported accomplice indicated that the individual who committed the crime and killed the real estate agent was a racketeer. So we are seeing these cross connections between both mob, CIA, and the communications that are coming out of the Zodiac killer. So today we are going to relook at a solve that Harriette worked on really hard this last week in regards to the 1963 envelope. And we're also going to hear from Nolan del Campo, attorney at law, in regards to their take. So that was my brief synopsis, and they're going to get to tell us how they reviewed it, their research, and what it is they believe was taking place at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and have this presentation put up before we bring them in, just so I can run down the letter that we're talking about. This is the 1963 letter. It says Oswald case, check either Howard or Spencer, perhaps Howard Spencer, link Ruby to Oswald. And this was mailed to the Dallas police in Dallas, Texas. And we see the beginning of the solve that Harriette was actually working on. Of course, this is just a preliminary, and we're going to introduce now Harriette Suchet, sorry, Harriette, to give us her lowdown on this particular solve of the envelope.
Oh my God. When you brought this attention to me about this envelope, I already did the letter portion, and that got 3 pages of all kinds of information. That was 2015, but the envelope was bugging me. So I was trying to work on it for like 3 or 4 days before I called you, because I was also trying to locate that particular, and I have it here. So anyways, okay, this version is very blurry. That's, I think the version that I got was, let's see if I can put it up here.
I've got it up on the screen.
But it's just pretty, the one that I had was pretty blurry, and it wasn't the FOIA request file that you ended up getting, and then sending it to me. I don't know. I know, all I know is I finally found it in my files, and I had gotten it around 2020, and so
Okay,
that
so
was much more clearer.
okay, so what we want to know is really basically what you used off of the envelope for this solve.
Oh, okay. Everything. What I've learned to do is to, in Jack's world, this is one of the versions that he uses, especially many years later in the Zodiac cases, to unabbreviate everything possible, and to identify especially everything about the stamp. So let me pull up what I have here. What I ended up getting was Post Meridium, Lancaster, California, December 3rd, 1963. After 5 days, returned to, and then there's two lines. And then Palmdale, California. The stamp is the National Christmas Tree, and the White House, issued November 1st, 1963. Bureau of Printing and Engraving, City, Santa Claus, Indiana. Printing method, Giori Press. Perforations 11, and the stamp is United States 5 cents. And then unabbreviating everything, and part of what's on there, that cancellation, it's Fight Tuberculosis, Cross of Lorraine, Support Tuberculosis Association, a microdot, and then instead of NTA, you unabbreviate that. It's the National Tuberculosis Association. And for some reason on this stamp, I mean, not the stamp, the letter, it's got a black ink stamp clock. And then it says underneath that, received December 5th, 1963. And then instead of just saying Dallas Police, you have to fill in everything there. I learned to find out the complete address as known at the time. So that would be Dallas Police Department, Municipal Building Annex, 106 South Harwood, Dallas, Texas. And out of all of that, that's when you anagram. And that's the labor of love hours. So,
and then that's what you've basically done. This next slide, I'm kind of showing how you've numbered each one.
Well, that's the preliminary, but
correct. And here is our final.
Yeah, because then I realized once I was working on it, there's a series of code keys. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'll try to be brief. The first code keys that I found were the code keywords was a complete spelling of Attorney General, and then Robert F. Kennedy, and then Washington District of Columbia, and then North American International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I'm going like this because I'm seeing it on the screen. Anyways, well, those were the code keywords, actually, all of that. And then I realized it's going to say something about Hoffa, but that is as I further went down into decoding this, Hoffa became just a code keyword itself, and it had to be broken up and move the F's and the A's and the H to other sections. But it was really a pretty easy decode to get, but surprising because I'll just read it off the screen. It comes out as, it's AG, or Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. The message is meant for Robert F. Kennedy. North American International Brotherhood of Teamsters Union, Cappuccino Lover, Hoffa, launder retirement pension in the morning of November 7th, 1963, in 4 Gucci suitcases to, and I know I'm going to not say this word correctly because it's a foreign language, but it's BTS, which is the airport code for Bratislava. Oh, I said it right. Okay. 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 Bratislava, Czechoslovakia Airport. And then it says Sam Giancana-Goons, Lee Bowers Jr., Carlos Savella on the railroad tracks, braiding Johnny Rosselli, shot president, and coroner reveal 5 perforations. Coroner sent 16 microstills. Democrats man JFK by van via south to north of Mexico to US I-5 and arrived 9:36 p.m. 11/30, 1963, so November 30th, 1963 AD, to classified E. Palmdale address. hid JFK there. Medical examiner Hume's lies. UTL, which means unable to locate. President, CIA said use RO, which is responding officer Tippit. So Dean Rusk authorized Tague O'Neill, the mortician, to cut back of head hair, plait it, do a plaster cast, fit hair to make Tippit look like JFK for obituary pictures, carbon copies sent to United States Press International, which is a Hearst-run organization. It's the competitor to AP.
Just another one of those media connections. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take this down now, and I'm going to bring in Nolan, and we're going to start talking about some of these facts. Good morning, Nolan.
Good morning, Nanette. Good morning, Harriette.
Good morning.
Thank you. So, what did you think of that solve that she had there, Nolan?
Well, it's kind of rambling. It mentions a lot of different names that I know are involved in the Kennedy assassination, and it makes references to people being taken or going to Mexico or this or that. But the very end is quite disturbing about how they're trying to make Officer Tippit look like JFK through surgery and whatnot. That's highly disturbing.
Well, I just want to interject there. I found this to back up a lot of people because, again, I went in person, and then I also knew and met Judith Berry Baker, especially on Facebook, and a lot of people that would come to these conferences, some of them would be bringing up about how Tippit was switched, and you'd want to sit back and take a deep breath, and some people would leave the room because they just didn't want to go that far. But this is saying that those people were correct, that their research that they did through years of going through all these files and meeting people who lived the history, saying something didn't add up right. And so this is confirming, because how do you get something like this? This is sent in 1963, and once you understand Jack and his people's system, how is it done? He's telling a message to Robert F. Kennedy, who's the Attorney General, going after Hoffa still, trying to bring him down, that this is where what happened. And it would take, because my family used to travel the Southwest to go back east a lot. If you were traveling by night and you had to go south into Mexico, and then go through and then come up I-5, which I-5 was there then at the time, into the border of near I think it's Tijuana. Anyways, it would take 6 days if you were driving by night. It would take 6 or 7 days to get there because you're sneaking a body into. You're doing the reverse. Instead of sneaking drugs into the country, you're sneaking a body.
Now, I know that there's another individual. If we could get the presentation popped up real quick, I'd like to show everybody this picture once again. This picture is actually a picture out of what is called the Controversy Papers. And the gentleman that actually wrote this book spent about 40 years in researching, reading files, and going and combing through things. And he actually also believes that there was some use for Officer Tibbetts, which is why he was killed during the commission of the assassination of JFK. And we can see in this picture how very close he is actually to JFK. So one half of this picture is JFK to the left. To the right, we see that is Officer Tibbetts. So this is a line of reasoning that many have believed that allowed them to perpetuate the single bullet theory. Because if JFK was hit with 3 bullets, then you wouldn't want to be able to show that to the American public. You want to show them somebody who's only been hit once. And in this particular case, Officer Tibbetts was shot behind the ear and the back of the head in a manner with a single bullet. So, all right, I'm going to take that back down and bring that back up and let Nolan go ahead and respond to the Officer Tibbetts.
There are a lot of mysteries in the JFK assassination story, but one of the biggest mysteries is why was Tippit killed and what relation did his killing have to the assassination? But I think the main thing that most people agree on is that one of the reasons is they could tie Lee Harvey Oswald to Tippit and then say, well, he killed Tippit and he killed Kennedy. It just gave him another reason to focus on Oswald as a lone assassin. But now I'm hearing these other things about Tippit that kind of makes sense in the bigger picture that kind of helps solve a little bit of the mystery of it, because it seems like a senseless death to almost all the researchers. Why did Tippett have to die? So,
right.
Well, here's the thing that
one thing I want to correct you on that though too. The theory is that yes, there were 3 gunshots from the school book depository that allegedly Oswald fired. The single bullet issue is the magic bullet theory, which is one bullet hit Kennedy, bounced off the interior of the car, and also hit Governor John Connally, who was riding in the same car. That's the magic bullet theory. It came up. Arlen Specter on the Warren Commission came up with the magic bullet theory, which is a separate issue.
Gotcha.
Well, this thing right now is becoming. I'm wondering, am I going to have a new book called the Magic Mortician Theory? Because this is a mortician doing his magic, and taking somebody who looks closely to JFK and then doing plaster casting. I'm like, the details that are coming out just doing this. But here's the blowaway part that I didn't want to. When I don't want to appear to be force-fitting, but I knew that the National Christmas tree sat on the ellipsis, as it sits there every year. It's called the ellipsis, and that part of Washington, D.C. is designed off of the Zodiac by Charles L'Enfant. And the ellipsis is the Zodiac. So get this, the address of the ellipsis is 15th Street Northwest, E Street, something like that. But where this classified E address is, where it leads to 15th Street and E something, when you look that up in Palmdale, it is classified. It's still run by the government, and it's a classified address. It's a government operated contractor. No, government-owned, contractor-operated, but it's Lockheed Martin and what they do for NASA and for the Air Force.
Wow!
So it sits right there. So that it's classified what they do there.
and of course we do see we do see that this particular postcard from Zodiac Jack was purchased in Palmdale, California.
Yeah. So it's saying to return to a certain portion there. What I didn't say, and I'll show it here. Well, the 2 lines look like railroad tracks when you replace it. And he's saying that Bowers and Savella, who was a hitman, he worked. Savella family was a very big mob connection family there, and Carlos Savella is the son of Nicholas Savella, who's a trained assassin. So Carlos Savella knew how to be assassin too. But so when you take those 2 lines and move it over, it looks like the railroad tracks. And Southern Pacific went to that part of Palmdale at the time in that area.
Well, and I've already stated that in many cases and in many of these communications and in many of these murders, the railroad tracks actually come into play. So things like gravel pit yards, cement yards, linen companies, many of these things that you can find as cross connections, including the fact that the Zodiac case in itself was labeled as an extortion case. This is a serial killer, and the case is labeled as extortion. It makes me feel like we're looking right back at the mob again, who has never been indicted for murder and only for extortion and racketeering. So the railroad tracks fits right on in with the theme of the Zodiac and the murders that we're about to hear about.
Well, I think
Lee Bowers, excuse me for interjecting, Lee Bowers worked for the railroads. He was a witness on the day of the assassination. Behind the grassy knoll, behind the picket fence, there was a rail yard. And Lee Bowers was the watchman up high above in the tower in the rail yard. And he was actually a witness that was trying to explain to the Warren Commission that he thought there were several people involved. He saw people running back and forth. And they actually apprehended the 3 tramps in a boxcar in that rail yard.
And who was our 3 tramps?
Well, the pictures I've studied, that there are in several books, there's famous pictures. But one looks just like E. Howard Hunt, one of the plumbers in the Watergate break-in, also affiliated with the CIA for quite a long time, since the 50s and the Arbenz or the overthrow of Arbenz in Guatemala. Then another one looks like Thomas Eli Davis, who's a known CIA operative, tall, lanky guy, the tall tramp. And then the other tramp in the front in the picture looks a lot like Frank Sturgis, who's also another one of the Watergate plumbers. So there's a real good book that I read years ago that makes the same connections. I don't know about Thomas Eli Davis, but it makes the connections of Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt as being two of the tramps. Now, there's a most recent book on the Kennedy assassination that I've read called Coup in Dallas by H.P. Alvarelli that goes way deep into Thomas Eli Davis and his work as a killer, assassin, and his affiliations with the CIA, and describes him to a T, and he looks just like the tramp, the middle tramp, the tall, slender, angular tramp with blonde, scruffy hair. I have the picture in a couple different books, and it's a famous picture if you just Google it.
And
just
clearly
Google
we know that
Kennedy assassination.
Well, clearly we know that it took far more than 3 people to pull off this entire event. So we know that just the 3 tramps are not the only people who are involved with what's going on that day. So there are some other people that they talk about having been at both JFK and RFK happenings. And was that Brading that you guys were talking about?
Eugene Hale Brading.
Also known as Jim Braden.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Yeah. So Jim Braden. As Jim Braden, he's seen leaving the Deltex building right after, but Eugene Hale Brading, it's Gary Fannin has a book on this, and he has pictures that he really can't find anywhere. he got somehow through Freedom of Information Act. He got a picture showing where there was a bullet right near what they call now, not really the southern grassy knoll, but right across the street. And Jack is saying that Brading is there, in that area, not too far from the railroad tracks. And that cops that found a bullet casing there. And so, that was the link right there that Brading was there. But there's other people who said that Brading was also at RFK's incident. And my opinion is because Brading survived that long and didn't get killed, that he was there gathering information. So he was going to turn and rat out a whole bunch of people.
So we see the mob connection, obviously, with JFK. One of the things that I had never been aware of is that that mob assisted in getting him into the presidency. And then, of course, he hired his own brother as the attorney general, and he had it out for everybody in the mob. He absolutely wanted Hoffa and all of these gangsters to be indicted for their criminal activities. And so we see that playing right back into it. We have a president who's supposed to save the mob. That doesn't happen. He gets assassinated, and later his brother is trying to hunt down these very same people he feels is responsible for his brother's death, and we find that he's assassinated as well.
Yep. Well, what I'm seeing right now, just looking at this envelope and seeing what it came up with, I think we're looking at the foundation for setting up for the Zodiac killer, because that's Washington, D.C., the Zodiac, the rotunda's in the center, so, and that's, and the stamp is the National Christmas Tree at the ellipse. That's the Zodiac. So I think that's what we're seeing. And I think LBJ, even though he didn't like JFK, he's realizing he has to kind of go along with this because these people kill presidents and he's just a target, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I also wanted to talk about some of the other individuals that were either what we refer to as suicided or murdered during this time frame. And I spoke a little bit with Nolan about this. Of course, everybody is aware that Marilyn Monroe purportedly committed suicide by an overdose. We start to see some of these OD type murders that are going to occur here soon with the Zodiac cases. So I think that this is just the onset of them using the appearance that somebody is OD'd on drugs when in fact they were actually murdered. So bringing that to heart, not just Marilyn Monroe, but Nolan had brought to mind, it was
2 journalists, female journalists.
Well, what about the
Dorothy
other?
Kilgallen
Okay.
And she was actually kind of like a Rhoda Barrett. She was a gossip columnist, but she was also a legitimate journalist. And she was the only journalist to interview Jack Ruby while he was in custody in jail. And she planned to write a book on her version, or her interview with Ruby and her version of the events on November 22nd, 1963. But shortly before her book was able to be published, she was suicided. Basically, she died of an overdose of alcohol and barbiturates. But that's they attribute it to suicide. I don't believe it.
No,
that's
not when
then
somebody.
there's Lisa Howard, another journalist, famous journalist in her time, and she was being used for back channel peace negotiations with the Castro regime. In fact, there's pictures of her in one of the books I have with Che Guevara, and it's also alleged that she was a lover of Fidel Castro. But anyway, that's just a side note.
Right.
But she was basically overdosed as well, and she ended up dying in the hospital later that day.
And then we had one more. We had a second affair, right? So aside from Marilyn, JFK also had a second. I haven't brought her up.
Affairs. Yeah.
Okay.
But his favorite was Mary Meyer, the ex-wife of Cord Meyer, a high-ranking CIA official. And Mary Meyer, this was after JFK was assassinated, maybe a year later, a year and a half later. She was shot in the head and in the body, and she was killed. She was murdered. That's never been solved. And then later, when Cord Meyer, they were already divorced at the time that she was killed, even at the time of JFK. But later, prior to Cord Meyer's death, they asked Cord, "Who do you think killed Mary?" And he said, "The same people that killed JFK," and implying plural, implying he knew. He was CIA, implying the CIA was at least partially responsible.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even this all brings up saying the CIA said, tell Rusk, and then Rusk authorizes to, to just do your mortician's magic. And Jack calls him a tag, which is, I told Nanette what it's a derogatory meaning to somebody who, well, we really can't say the word. It's kind of like calling an Irishman the N-word. And because I had to look it up, I said, I've seen this word before, and I got so many solves, Nolan. I got hundreds that even Annette hasn't seen, but he's used the word before. And so he's calling O'Neill, who's the funeral director at that funeral home, a really bad word.
Well, Dean Rusk was not technically CIA. Dean Rusk was State Department. He wasn't Secretary of State at that time, but later he became Secretary of State under LBJ. And then again, later he comes back as Secretary of State for a later president. I think it may have been Nixon for a while. But anyway, Rusk is one of those guys that never goes away. He's just always hanging around. But I'm sure he had ties with the CIA.
Well,
but he was in the State Department.
He lives on too. I've discussed this with Nanette, and I think it's kind of safe to say that the people who continue to live on that may have been involved lived on, so they paid their debt back to society another way by ratting out all kinds of people and helping kill the other people. It's righteous vigilantes. That's what we called it last show. It's just unbelievable.
Nixon was in Dallas that day too, and lots of different people were in Dallas. George Bush Sr. was in Dallas that day.
I'm pretty sure young Clinton was there too.
It's crazy.
At one point, he shook hands with Kennedy. Young Bill Clinton. So
and after hearing all of this stuff with JFK and RFK, I really feel bad that Clinton was, ostracized for Monica Lewinsky when we find out that our former presidents all have multiple partners. It's kind of a disgusting little affair here, but nobody seems to be on the up and up.
And one thing that we need to point out is that it wasn't just the mob and the CIA that didn't like the Kennedys. J. Edgar Hoover hated the Kennedys. Robert Kennedy was technically his boss. They wouldn't even talk to each other. And who was in charge of the investigation after both assassinations? Hoover. the FBI. Who failed to solve it? Hoover.
Right.
Okay, who forever denied the existence of the mafia? Hoover.
Yeah.
Now Hoover, did he run FBI or?
Yeah, forever. Since like 1924.
Until he died.
Yeah,
And
until
so-
exactly.
And so our opposition in the CIA is Dulles or Helms at this point?
Alan Dulles ran the CIA forever. And even, see, after the Bad Pigs, JFK fired Alan Dulles and Richard Bissell, the second in command, because he felt that they had tricked him in regard to the chance for success of the Bad Pigs. And basically what they wanted, they knew it was doomed to fail. They wanted JFK and the military to come in and do airstrikes to protect the men that were invading that landed on the Bad Pigs. So when JFK refused to send the Air Force in, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA, everyone really, really resented that.
Is this Bissell, I'm just going to throw this in here, related to the woman last name Bissell who started the Tuberculosis Association and using the Cross of Lorraine cross?
Perhaps that might be just the way Jack was trying to relate in by saying tuberculosis. That might be his way of saying Bissell. That
absolutely is.
Bissell, which is the CIA, second in command CIA. Because even after they were
probably
out in the CIA,
okay. Bissell. Okay.
Dulles still ran the CIA until he died, basically. Even though he wasn't director anymore, it was McCone was the first director, and then later Richard Helms. But one of the people that was there the whole time was Angleton.
Mm-hmm.
James Jesus Angleton.
I think you've talked about Angleton before, haven't you, Harriette?
Oh yeah, he was in charge of CIA security in the United States, but basically he was in charge of assassinations.
Well, I just want to say one more thing really quick. The Cross of Lorraine, that Bissell, the lady, started the design for Tuberculosis Association, that originates out of, I'm going to say this word wrong, Bratislava. It originates right out of there because that was the capital of the Hungarian kingdom, and that's the Cross of Lorraine comes right out of there. So there's so much that Jack is saying in this envelope. I already knew where the Cross of Lorraine came from, but I was, oh my God. Then you bring up about Bissell, and I had to re-educate myself of the National Tuberculosis Association. This would be Bissell.
This would kind of be like when Jack's reference to super fudge, meaning that it worked well. The fourth grader or the anthrax attack worked well. So you talking about this Tuberculosis Association, its association with Bissell, and Bissell actually cross-referencing itself back to somebody who is involved with the situation. Is exactly the way Zodiac does things. Zodiac 101 is to twist. There's 1 to 2 meanings for everything he does. But if you look deep enough in it, it is pointing in a particular direction.
He thinks he's so clever and so funny.
I'm a little enamored. I'm not going to lie. Like some of the times when I have to read some of this stuff and realize that what he's really saying is kind of like watching a commercial these days where they might be giving you one message that you perceive, but underlying is a completely different message that means something totally different.
So, wow.
Nanette, if I may at this point, you started the show with saying that this is the anniversary, the 59th anniversary of the JFK commencement address at American University. And basically that speech is one of the most famous speeches in history. It's known as the peace speech. And I think that goes basically what it says. He wanted to disarm. Not only did he want to have a nuclear test ban, his ultimate goal was disarmament. And that really upset the military and the military-industrial complex. So we can't forget that who's benefiting from these assassinations. It's the richest of the rich. It's the people that build bombs.
Military.
It's the people who benefits when there's wars? The people that make planes, the people that build tanks, the people that make ammunition. And it's not just Americans, it's international.
Correct.
It's international, and it's been going on forever, but especially since World War II.
Correct.
When you said that, I'm thinking Lockheed Martin and it's class. It says it's classified when you try to look this up, and that's where this is saying that they brought the president's body by November 30th, and this is after a funeral that everybody cried over, thinking, and I just have to tell people that was not JFK in the casket. For all we know, it was Smokey the Bear. I mean, we just, I mean, who was in the casket or what was in the casket?
One of the best.
Oh my God, that leads me to people who did discussions about how the casket didn't weigh the same, where they were, oh my God, what's his name? Hubert Clark. He got into heated arguments with people. He was the African American who made history, holding onto the casket, and people were telling him there was a different weight in the casket. Didn't you notice? And there was heated arguments at the Dallas conference. Oh my God. And he said, well, hey, I didn't open up the casket. No, I didn't see who was in there. I was just, carrying the casket. But, who was in there? What was in there? Now, will we ever really know? I mean, now I'm pretty convinced that was not JFK in there. And I was a little girl with my parents, and people were watching TV when this happened. November 25th was the funeral in 1963. And, somebody was in there. Somebody died. A lot of people died over this, but that's where we cry over that.
Right.
One of the best books on the JFK assassination. It's an older book. It's called Crossfire, written by Jim Mars. Okay. And there's a picture of purportedly Lee Harvey Oswald in his casket, and it looks nothing like Lee Harvey Oswald. Mm-hmm. So in fact, I have that picture. I'm going to try and find it real quick, and maybe we can put it on the screen.
Right.
I've met Jim Mars. I've met a whole number of people that are now no longer with us. But I met Tosh Plumlee, who was mad. And I was saying that Johnny Roselli was there because he brought Johnny Roselli and other people there on a plane. And
I think the interesting part of this entire thing is that they led us to believe certain facts in this particular case for many years. And as we go down the road with this stuff, that most of the happenstances that the government is responsible for does not even become public knowledge until 30, 40 years after the fact. And with that being said, I mean, it falls in line with Alan Dulles actually destroying most of the paperwork in regards to the MK Ultra project. Luckily, one of the clerks had misfiled 30,000 of those documents in the wrong location, so they were not discovered or destroyed as Dulles had instructed. And that's how we even became to find out about the MK Ultra project and the possibility that obviously Jack's proximity to all of the happenstances there also led me to believe that he was involved. And that's not despite the fact that we see some of those solves in the Zodiac letters from Lawrence Swearingham indicating that MK Ultra was something that he was a part of.
Well, that's where Jack and his world, his crew,
come down a little bit. There we go.
Yeah. No, that doesn't look like him.
Does that look like Lee Harvey Oswald to you?
No. No. Just hold it still. But no, that doesn't.
Oh. Not from what I was used to seeing. Where was he shot?
Politician's magic. Sorry.
Where was he shot? Was he shot in the head? Was he shot in the stomach?
No, he was shot in the gut. He was in the gut. He was shot in the gut, and that's where Mel Belli took the case because he was shot in the gut, but left to bleed for 45 minutes to an hour, and Mel Belli was saying, well, okay, Ruby shot him, but the death is on the responsibility of the first responders and the hospital who let him bleed right there. So my family's attorney, William Bernstein, worked on, he's no longer with us, but a very good friend of my family, William Bernstein, worked on the Jack Ruby case. We always thought that was a unique thing, but so
we've got about I'm sorry, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm just giving you guys a heads up at this particular point. But I do find it interesting that Melvin Belli is one of the people that the Zodiac wrote to. So if everybody can kind of start to see how I've put this together and why I believe there's a heavy mob, CIA, media, political, and big money instance, you start to see why I believe that Jack had a handler and that Jack wasn't killing people because he wanted to. It's because he had to. And some of those people that were killed were just innocent bystanders to make it look like it was a serial killing. And so this is how I really came to some of these conclusions throughout my research.
Well, that's supposed to be the presentation, to make you look over there and think it's a lover's lane thing, that these people were innocent bystanding people, you know, when the truth is over off in your peripheral vision, and Jack and his crew are, you know, sending out these cryptic messages. You talked about how MK Ultra was that, like, files were destroyed. Well, Jack and what he's doing is he's, you know, preserved MK Ultra and what was going on in these cryptic communications that we're still finding years later. I'm working on stuff that is, oh my God.
I want to make two last points. The first point is Alan Dulles' brother, John Foster Dulles, was the Secretary of State under Eisenhower for 8 years. And of course,
you've
Richard
seen
Nixon
SOS.
was the vice president. Excuse me.
And you've seen SOS come up many times in the cryptic messages, right, Harriette?
Yeah.
Okay. And your second point, Nolan?
The second point is Jack Ruby silenced Oswald, but Jack Ruby was silenced as well because he died in prison before his trial could come about. The only people that really had access to him were Belli and the journalist Kilgallen, and they silenced her as well.
So everybody pretty much involved that could tell this story was literal.
Facts come out.
It's amazing.
And it's amazing how intricate and how many different people were actually involved, and to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman, crazed gunman with Soviet and Cuban sympathies, and that's why he killed Kennedy. It's a joke. It's a farce.
Well, you're bringing up about Oswald. It was just, what was it, a couple of weeks that he did that bus trip from Dallas into Mexico?
Allegedly.
And
there was a double. There was an Oswald doppelganger as well.
Well, Judith Berry Baker knew Oswald, and she said that he did the bus trip to try to get some reconnaissance or some kind of information. Now I'm seeing, this is like, what, 60 something years later, the possibilities of how it was to see what was going to happen, go into Mexico and drive at night and whatever they were going to do. And then you brought up about the military industrial complex, very pissed off about, you know, Kennedy's going to disarm and, you know, going to do something about the Vietnam escalation. And a lot of those, the mob connected to, oh my God, Lockheed Martin. Oh my God. So
I've had an opportunity to be out at Lockheed Martin on a couple occasions, and I taught handwriting classes to the American Society of Industrial Security International. So I've been out there, and of course, in those meetings, you have Homeland Security, you have the governor's detail, you have privatized security, contract security, all of the things that actually fall along the lines of what you're talking about, this industrial complex. So very true, very true. Well, we are about down to 1 minute at this point. Is there any last statements that anybody would like to make?
Yes. Stain Caesar, the security guard for Robert F. Kennedy, who's suspected of being the one that actually did the kill shot to the back of the head, I believe he worked for Lockheed, and his alleged job was a plumber. Is the term they use for the Watergate break-in conspiracies.
Well, and like I said, some of these mobsters had legitimate businesses like mortuaries, so they could cover some of these fix-ups on these murders in linen companies. And we know that Jack went to work for a linen company. So we see that Jack's menial jobs, which really didn't pay much, really allowed him to get around, do what he wanted, buy what he wanted when he wanted. And that was something I could never explain. How on those incomes could he afford to do that? So that's it. I think we're pretty much done, you guys.
Get the books.
Get the books.
They're on. These are just, there's 200 solves in these books that, and
awesome.
I walk people through. I show them They're on lulu.com, but you can find them on the retailers. But I'm not making them, money, a lot of money anyways. I'm making something, but my point of view is keep going and keep, revealing the truth. Jack left the truth to be found if you follow his system and you know what he's using. He uses ciphers, he uses stenographic code, and then sometimes a stenographic code with cipher symbols in them, and then you got an anagram from there. I'm just amazed, and many times I've had Jack come to me in dreams, tell you the truth, to say, well, try it this way. And then I wake up.
We're 1 minute past now, Harriette.
Anyways,
but I want to thank you guys for being here. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Oh,